This episode of the Fine Homebuilding podcast is brought to you by Loctite's Tight Foam. The best builders take weatherization seriously. When they need to seal a gap that's too small for insulation but big enough to create a draft, they reach for Loctite's Tight Foam. With 3 formulations for everything from small cracks to the biggest gaps, there's a tight foam product for every job, including a low expanding product designed to seal the rough opening around windows and doors. The high-density foam forms a tenacious bond to most common building materials, stays flexible to prevent cracking when materials move, and keeps air, moisture, and pests out of the house. Builders who care about energy efficiency, comfort, and durability choose Tight Foam. Visit LoctiteProducts.com for more information.
In an area that gets a fair amount of rain along coastal Oregon and coastal Washington. Wasn't on every house, but quite a few houses had it. And I'm guessing it might work. Probably not the answer you were thinking was going to come from me.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor Mike Girton.
Hi.
Green Building Advisor Senior Editor Kylie Jacques.
Hello.
And our producer Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, folks, what do you think about my office?
Ooh. Looks like you've been working.
Yeah, I've been doing what I do. I don't know if I'd call it work, but I have been hanging out with Andy Grace's crew. And it's been fantastic. We've been working on I haven't been working on it, but I've been photographing them, put sheet copper on a 45 projection bay window. And it's been super fun to watch. It is artistry, Mike, right?
It is, especially working with copper. If you know what you're doing, the results at the end are just outstanding.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Mm-hmm.
It's, not a fast process. It has to be done correctly. A lot of money is involved, so everyone is expecting it to look perfect. Mm-hmm. It's funny, the first thing Andy told me when I got here was that, we wear gloves all the time in long sleeves so we don't put smudges on the copper. And within 5 minutes, I had picked up a sheet that they had been working on and put my fingerprints all over it.
What, did you need to get a photograph or something?
I was worried someone was going to step on it, so I just picked it up off the grass. But that wasn't the worst of it. So then yesterday, it's in the afternoon. It's getting pretty hot, and when you look through the camera lens on staging, it makes you disoriented, right? When you go back to your normal vision. So I make a point of always making sure I'm balanced, and that meant putting my hand right on the copper roof without thinking about it.
That's more important.
And I come in this morning and you can just see my fingers and hand just smack right in the middle of the copper sheet.
And that's going to be there forever, at least for 5 or 6 years, unless they wash it.
So we washed it with vinegar, and I think it's solved the problem. At least I hope, because I don't want to have to pay to redo this all on. Do you think I can put that on my expense account?
So explain what the problem is when you touch copper with your bare hand.
I don't even know. I mean, it just tarnishes. What is going on?
Does it ionize it or something?
So I'm not a copper guy, but I've worked a lot with it. But it's the just the natural oils or acid on your hand, and you just like when you touch anything, you touch your stainless steel refrigerator, you leave a handprint. Well, with the copper, you're contaminating that surface. So now the patina, as it starts to weather a little bit, is going to be different. It's going to be blotchy where your hand was. So if you don't do that wash, you'll end up with your handprint on there for, maybe 4, 5, 6 years until it all kind of evens out.
That's
great. I'll be able to show
information.
the family my handiwork from the, from this beautiful home, right? It's this is what I did.
I love it.
So this is quite the project. This is a large home. This is a room addition. The rest of the house is getting a lot of work on the older part of the home too. There's site work being done, and it would be a great place to spend a few months working. I can tell you, it's lovely scenery, rolling hills.
I
Now
don't
is
think you
fall foliage. Go
in
ahead, Kylie.
Western Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if you ever said exactly where you were.
Ligonier specifically. What have you been up to, Mike?
Today or just in construction wise?
Whatever.
Well, tenant care.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I bug my tenants. If there's a problem, tell me what the problem is. Don't just not tell me because you don't want to bother me. And invariably, by the time they catch up with me, there's a list of like 8 things. So I was fixing some window shades, adjusting the temperature on a indirect hot water heater, and then stopping some leaks around a shower door. So the usual chores and tasks that, if it was a homeowner, they might take care of it, or in some cases, if it was a homeowner, they would just
Forget about it.
forget about it and just let it keep going. But
That happens too.
I'd rather take care of the little problems before they become big ones.
Hey.
So your honey-do list is like, multiplied. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, it just goes on and on and on. That's one house. Here's the next one. It's just
Oh no, Mike. Oh. So how many hours a week do you think you spend on that kind of work?
not as much as I used to. I've got most things pretty much taken care of. So probably it's more, maybe 4 or 5 hours a month. Probably more a better way to think about it.
Wow, you breeze through it. Get through it fast. 'Cause that's
I bet you have a good plan before you go to one of these properties, like what tools you need, what you're going to do first, so you can let things dry, I presume.
Well, ideally, if I get the list ahead of time, but some tenants say just, oh, come over, I've got a couple of things, and they'll mention one of them. And then, of course, when I show up, the list is about 8 items long, and then I have to run home. Fortunately, my house is only a 2-minute drive from most of my rentals, so
that makes a big
it's not a
difference.
problem.
Yeah.
I can see where a contractor, if they're got far-ranging, far-flung properties, it'd be a lot more work.
Mike, are all of your properties single family homes?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Yeah.
I want you to be my landlord.
And then I can
I'll
put a
be
new
very
well in for you.
efficient. Yeah, right.
I think we need to explain the landlord relationship to Kylie, right?
No. I'm just saying, like, I'm going back to renting. And so I would love to have a landlord because I'd be very efficient with your time and I would make that list for you. And I think I could be a very good tenant.
Well, this
in
is
that way.
huge news. You're what's going on,
so
Kylie?
that's what's going on in my life. I've made a major decision and it's been a long time in coming and I'm going to do it. I'm going to sell my house.
Wow.
So once you decide that, you've got a lot to think about. So I've been kind of just watching the market. I've got my time figured out. You have to start making your plans. There's
Are you
lots
going
to
to
do.
relocate to somewhere else?
Yes, I'm going to relocate to Western Massachusetts, where I will rent for a short time before I ultimately buy a slice of land in Vermont and build your work
passive
alongside
house.
somebody who could build my little house. Yeah, my little pretty good house.
Your family's from Western Mass, am I right?
Yes, those are my old stomping grounds. That's where I was born and raised. Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah, but selling a house, I bought this house by myself and I'm going to sell this house by myself and I have to figure all of that out. Sometimes I look back and recall that whole process as some of our colleagues are going through it now. And I think, wow, how did I ever pull all that off?
How do any of us pull it off the first time, right?
Yeah,
it's a lot to do.
I learned so much. Yeah, it's been so enriching to have had a house. And it will be hard to go back to renting again. So, for those of you out there who are in rental situations, it's just a different way to live in a structure,
I liked renting when I did it because I liked having so much more free time. I didn't like apartment living with shared walls and units. Like that's less fun.
I don't think I'm really going to try to avoid going back to that.
Yeah.
So,
how about you, Jeff? You got any life's changes going on?
No, just more seasonal changes, taking the window air conditioner out of this room and putting the glass in the storm door, and that's about it.
Are leaves falling yet in your place?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, with the dry weather, they started in August, I think.
Hmm. Well, it's gorgeous here. I can tell you when I got here Monday, there was like one of the trees that are in the background. You go, oh, can't see it right now, but it was just starting to change color, and now there's like a whole row of them. It's amazing how quickly that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
It is quick.
Well, as always, we heard from our great listeners. This comes from Josh. He wrote in to say, I know I'm late to the party, but because books have taken over my podcast listening time, so I'm behind. In reference to Jay's question in 489 about long builds, when we are getting builds ready for winter and spring work, we do footings and foundation, but not the concrete floor. This at least lasts through the winter in South Dakota without having to heat it all winter. Andy and I were talking about this in the truck today, and we assume it's just got to be good draining soil, right? Right?
Yeah. I sort of visualized that too when reading that. I was like, how does that work? Because otherwise it would just be a big bathtub, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We've seen that, right, Kylie?
Have we?
Yeah, I
Remind me.
have. It's heartbreaking.
I bet.
Yeah, you go home from the job site one day and you come back the next, and like the hole is full of water. And
Yeah.
especially around here in Western Pennsylvania, there's these like clay layers of red or yellow clay, and boy, nothing gets through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think about this, Mike? Would this be a safe practice?
Well, we talked about it before. You've done a podcast. I wrote it a reply in, and yeah, you can if they got well-drained soils, then the water is going to flow through. And unless you have soil that holds the water, water is what expands. It causes a problem with the foundation when you get the frost under it. So as long as the water drains out, there's no water to expand. So the footings can last through the winter, footings and foundation without a problem with any heaving.
It's just make sure you have that figured out, because it's a costly mistake that is hard to fix. This comes from Michael. He had the lazy addition, I think is what we called it in the original conversation. Michael writes in here, hello, podcast team. I was honored to hear you talk about my humble snake highway on the podcast. I'll take you up on your offer to help, and I'd like to emphasize that all visitors who come with tools are entitled to free beer. Say no more, Michael. I'm taking the day off work this Wednesday and Thursday to rip off the roof, so come on by. Sorry, Michael, I was here in Pennsylvania. Otherwise, I would have been there with my tool belt on. You guys more or less nailed my personality. I sadly am not afraid to do some demo. I've sometimes thought about writing the word consequences on my Sawzall with a Sharpie.
That's a good one.
I appreciate your technical advice, of course, but I most appreciate that you provide a forum that unites professionals and amateurs on the notion that a craftsperson can be a professional or a DIYer. We all bring our own experience and passion for the craft of home building and renovation. I'd be happy to join you on the after show, but I have to say that our renovation story has not been the happy one it was intended to be. The reality is that our family has seen our dream of a quiet country house becoming somewhat buried by the emotional and financial cost of a major renovation. We will have to sell our house, so now I find myself working for a future owner, not for my own family, which changes the mindset a bit. I still love what I'm doing and have come far enough in the project to start seeing the finished product, but I will have to wait for another opportunity sometime in the future to know what it's like to live in a house I've worked on. Thank you for keeping craft alive. Michael, it makes me sad to hear that. I'd love to know what's going on.
Yeah, what a beautiful email. I mean,
yeah, it is.
A lot of sentiment there. I like the way he spoke about this, and I actually, when I read this yesterday for the first time, I got a little choked up. I thought that's a big thing. It's a big thing.
It's very sweet sentiment.
I feel for his family, and I hope that they get to do that house. I hope they get to have that house.
Boy, selling my house in Stowe after having spent, nearly 10 years working on it, 9 years working on it, that was crushing. And I think we both thought we'd live there forever. So you make choices based on that assumption. I would tell people listening to the show, think about that sometimes. If,
Like what? Can you give an example, Patrick?
Oh my God. So we picked, cedar shingle siding. Did that get us anything at resale? No. I didn't get, I don't get to enjoy that. We had 3 tile showers in the property that we did, and replaced the HVAC system just because it was working, but old.
Well,
Well,
let's lift the mood a little.
okay, here we go. This comes from Jim. Very timely question here. Oop, I've skipped one, I think.
Yeah, James.
Sorry. This comes from James. Hey, podcast crew. I've been thinking about upgrading the air sealing and insulation along my rim joist, but I need to clean the surfaces inside the 110-year-old joist bays in order to get any sealant to stick. And it seems like there's always more dirt and dust no matter how long I hit it with a wire brush. Some of the joist bays are especially difficult because the joists were used as forms for the foundation, and some of them have a thin coating of concrete. Any tips for how I can get these areas cleaned up in a reasonable amount of time? James. Who wants to go first?
Working on air sealing old homes is tricky because a lot of times it's all rough sawn lumber, and so it's all, fuzzy with all the wood fibers, or in this case, there were board forms that they just reused, which was really common. So all that contamination makes it hard for whatever the sealing materials are to bond to it to get a good tight air seal. So Jim's right in being concerned about it and doing something. I thought a little bit about
This
what
is,
to do.
Was
Yeah.
it Jim? James.
James.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Jim
James.
is next.
Jim's okay.
Yeah.
James. Yes,
Sorry to interrupt.
that's right though. Um, I've never had to struggle to do what James is attempting to do on more than one joist bay. Um, if you're going to do a bunch of them, you got to simplify the process. And the one thing that came to mind is to put a sealer consolidant, like a 2-part or even a 1-part, something that's going to impregnate the concrete, make sure it's bonded to any residue of the concrete, make sure it's bonded to the wood, and any of those maybe loose wood fibers or dust kind of all just get stuck together. So now you've got a solid surface, something that's a little smoother that you can then either apply a foam or bond a sealant to.
Do you have an example of one of these products, Mike, on the top of your head?
Well, I just use the general, a wood epoxy consolidant. There's several on the market. I think it's Abbott. Is it Abbotron?
Yeah,
I think
they
it's
make
one company that has a
and
lot of
Minwax
them.
has one, I believe.
Okay. And you might even be able to do a similar thing with just a primer sealer. I don't know if those would be adequate enough to get a deep penetration, because that's really what you need to do, is have something that's going to stick the concrete that you're dusting off now with a wire brush to the wood underneath, so that it doesn't come loose in the future. I don't know if a regular primer sealer would do that.
I was tempted to tell James just to, use a 2-part spray foam kit. My experience is that sticks to almost everything, but maybe that's not a good idea.
That came to my mind too, but I never really want to recommend that. But Mike's solution seems like a better way to go.
Yeah, I just worry about, it's kind of like when you have wood siding out to the sunlight for, a year before you put primer or paint on it.
Mhm.
The wood fibers are now damaged and they're going to end up sloughing off. So you really want to have, sand it off and get it, down to the real wood that's underneath. And that's why I thought an epoxy consolidant would be a way to go. It's a very thin material, very liquidy, and it absorbs right into the wood fibers. And I'm guessing it would also encapsulate or bond to that concrete as well.
I got one other possible suggestion, James, and it's an opportunity to buy a new power tool you don't perhaps have, and that's die grinder, and get a wire wheel in the end of it, and it's kind of shaped the right way to do the work you're doing, and at least it would suck less than a wire brushing by hand, but I'm guessing it would still be messy and labor intensive.
Well, you can experiment with the product.
Yeah, try it, right?
Try it.
Yeah.
Got lots of joist bays to work with.
Are there wire brush attachments for an oscillating tool? I haven't looked into it, but I would think that
I think
that's your $1 million idea, Mike.
Yeah, it is, right? It seems like there should be if there's not.
So maybe some product manufacturer like Spider is listening. They make a lot of accessory tools, and they'll take the idea and run with it.
What I did one time is I took a a Sawzall blade, right? A 12-inch or 8-inch blade. And I put a scrub brush that I, drilled a couple holes in the Sawzall blade and put a scrub brush on the end to
That's
clean
smart.
my grout.
They work well?
It was
Oh, for grout?
fantastic,
Yeah,
Kylie.
that would be good I can picture that perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be
I
good for
suggest a
grout.
cordless Sawzall, though, not a corded one, right? You don't want to stand
Oh,
in the
right, yeah.
bathtub with a corded Sawzall.
I'm going to take, whose advice was it to write consequences? If I ever have a Sawzall again, I'm going to write consequences on it. I love that so much.
Jeff, what do you think about this air sealing dilemma?
Yeah, no, I really like Mike's idea. I think
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense
it
because
does.
I think it would work well on the concrete as well as the wood fiber. So,
Well, James, try that, please, and then we can recommend this to other folks who have the same problem. I don't think the folks who air sealed my band joist did anything more than cut pieces of polyiso and spray foam the perimeter. I don't think any cleaning happened. I should go check and see how it's working.
I think remember Mason Lord's project on that, I think it's a 1700s Cape where he restored the whole thing. Do you remember that project?
Was that the one Andy was working on?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I pictured that because, this house is 100 years old. But anyway, it seems like when that situation is happening, not exactly what he's got going on, but oftentimes it seems like the solution is to just take out the mud sill, the band joist, get rid of it and replace it, right? The one that's made of timber.
Big
and it's
honking job, Kylie.
I know, you got to raise the house up. I know. I'm not suggesting it. That's what I was picturing. That seems to be like, if you're dealing with rot at that level, you've got to remove it for a full restoration, right?
Oh yeah, that all had to be rebuilt because, that's the connection from the house to the foundation.
Right.
It's so often you find rot at that place in old houses, especially, historic homes, because water management was not a thing. They all have wet basements. Used to be that, the ginormous wood fuel appliances would dry out the house all winter, but then folks put in, cellulose insulation and, do other things that keep that, heat from flowing through the assembly. How many times have you put up replace a deck, Mike, and you have to replace parts of the band joist? Isn't it almost always?
Not as much as I thought I would. It's really only happened to me a couple of times. It's pure luck because you're right. That could be that is a big problem area, especially if it was an old deck there to begin with that wasn't flashed right, and then that's when the risk goes up. Then you're gonna perhaps find some rot behind the old ledger.
Yeah, we didn't teach people to do that correctly in the first generations of decks, right?
Hey, speaking of copper and decks and that area, you know how my deck is flashed with copper nailed to the ledger and then cut over the joists.
Cool.
To flap over. It's pretty good. It looks okay too, You
got to get that water away from that connection. That's important. Jim was thinking about roof sheathing. He wrote in, says, I don't think I've ever heard you guys talk about roof seam taping except with zip system. In the case described in this Weather Channel video, it's applied under the felt on conventional sheathing. This seems topical with Hurricane Ian hitting Tampa right now. And I think we have talked about this on the podcast before, but maybe I haven't mentioned it. But Mike, you want to take the lead on this?
I'm glad Jim pointed it out because when we get into hurricane season and it's only when a disaster happens that people think about, oh, this is bad, I should have done something more. And they could have. Whenever you have a roof replaced, you've got an opportunity, whether you do the work or somebody else is doing the work, you have the opportunity to do what Jim's talking about. And that video that he shared is well worth a watch.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a good sense of what we now call the sealed roof deck system. Fine Homebuilding's done a couple of articles. I wrote an article on what I called storm-proofing a roof in 2012, and then we did a webinar right when the pandemic started in the spring of 2020 on the same topic. And the idea is to use the roof sheathing as a third barrier to water getting into the house. The whole point of having a roof on is to keep water out of the house. to begin with on regular, rainy days. But when you get a bad storm and the roof material gets blown off or ripped off with a tree branch or something hitting it, or if it just gets punctured, or it could even be just a hailstorm damage, water gets through the primary roofing. Maybe the underlayment's damaged, or it already has a bunch of holes in it. Then the water gets to the sheathing. Well, the only place the rain water can get through the sheathing is at the joints. So if you seal up all those joints, you sealed out the water. So the I go a little bit. So what Jim's talking about and what the main process is you just take a 3 or a 4-inch wide self-adhering tape, and after you strip off the existing roofing, or on a new construction, you put the tape over all the joints in the sheathing. Over the last, say 5 to 10 years, several manufacturers of flashing tapes have come out with products specifically for this. In the old days, what we did was we take regular ice barrier membrane in the 3-foot wide rolls, and we would just slit it into our own tape, and then we put it on the joints. Me and a bunch of other contractors I met around the country started doing it. Everybody in their own little world just says, hey, this peel and stick stuff is pretty good. What if we put it over the joints? And I think people have adopted that idea, going back as far as 20 and 30 years ago when the ice barrier membranes became pretty prevalent. So now there's a bunch of information out on the internet. We've got some links in the show notes that will refer to the Insurance Institute for Home and Business Safety, and they have a guide called the Fortified Home Program, and part of that program is sealing all the joints in the sheathing, as well as FEMA has a guide. The National Association of Home Builders has a guide. So all of these are out there, and then of course all of the manufacturers of the tapes also have instructions on how to do this, and it's not hard to do.
And the point that I've heard that makes so much sense to me is being put out of your house is so disruptive to your life. Wouldn't it be great if your house was not completely ruined when its roofing material blew off? And I don't think anyone is expecting this to keep all the water out of your house, but it minimizes the damage quite a bit. And that's why the insurance business is pushing this, and it's become codified in a number of states, and Connecticut is among them, and I know Alabama was another. And gosh, to me, it just makes so much sense.
To give a little perspective, I took this stat down when I was watching that video. A 2,000 square foot roof receiving 1.5 inches of rain per hour is the equivalent of 9 bathtubs of water getting into your house. Which is mind blowing. It puts it in perspective. But my question is, Jim started off by saying we hadn't talked about doing taping other than with a zip system on roofs, and I guess I always just assumed that joints always get taped on the roof. Is that not basic practice or general practice?
No, I would say that's unusual. Someone has to be encouraged to do that either through code, or their client wants, a second line of defense for storms.
I think the roofs that I've seen have been by high performance builders, and that's why I just assumed that was the way it was done.
Yeah, and the thing with, and I think those high performance builders are probably using a zip system, but this practice works with regular plywood or regular OSB. Mm-hmm. And sure, you're going to get where there were nail holes in the sheathing. It might be a drip or two, but of those 9 bathtubs of water, you might get a couple of cups of water. So the damage isn't going to be severe enough. Do you have ceiling collapses, water running through your light fixtures, all over your hardwood floors and all of that? Because a lot of the damage in a lot of the storm-related damage isn't from the storm and the wind blowing in the case of a hurricane. It's due to the water getting into the building.
Which also destroys all your furnishings that, it's not just the house. And it's not just its disruption of your life, it's your possessions. And some things are not replaceable, photos, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I wish this had been done on my mother's place in Florida, because I'm flying Saturday down to the west coast of Florida to do a salvage run because the roof got blown off of her house in all of that damage. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Well, it's not a big deal. Insurance will cover it. And I think I
So,
might be spending a lot of time in Florida this winter doing
oh,
a whole new repair and fixing it all up. But yeah, the amount of water that got in there from what I could see from the photographs caused the ceilings to come right down.
oh, what a mess.
And
These
that
poor
makes her
people.
life really hard right
Awful
now.
right
Can I
now.
can I
Yeah.
say that?
Yeah, you can say
Fortunately,
that.
it's her house that she goes through for 4 months in the winter.
Oh,
So
good.
she
She's
was
not.
here,
Oh, good. Good,
all
good.
safe.
Okay.
And she'll have to stay here over the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She said, I haven't seen a winter in
I was
30
gonna say,
years.
welcome back to New England. It's much
Yeah,
more
exactly.
temperate than she probably remembers.
Yeah.
Send her to Tucson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. I think I might.
I think everyone should pay attention to the fortified home program. The things in it are pretty reasonable in my estimation. And boy, if you can make your house more better survive high wind and rain events, I think that's worth doing.
This is becoming a real rallying cry on GBA. Armando
Resilience.
Cobo, yeah, resilience and building for,
There are so
high
many
wind
things
events
that
and,
can be done.
yeah,
Whether
severe
it's
weather.
wildland interfaces,
Mhm.
whether it's flood protection, whether it's water protection,
Mhm.
or even just wind-blown debris protection, that the homeowner or the builder have to plan for when something's getting remodeled or built. It's not something, the Band-Aids afterwards just don't quite get to the level of resiliency as doing it right that first time. And the costs are just wee costs.
Yeah.
Mike, that last one that you mentioned, the wind-blown tree events or something.
Wind-blown debris.
Debris, yeah. That's a hard one. How do you protect against that? The other things conceptually around the building envelope make sense to me, but how do you protect
The biggest thing is being prepared in having storm shutters,
Mhm.
whether they're ones that get removed or that they're ones that roll down, or whether it's impact glass. If you're in a zone like in a, I think Western Massachusetts, where you're going, is prone to tornadoes in the
Yeah.
summer. They're not, they're really terrible tornadoes, but they're bad enough to
We get 'em
cause
here, yeah.
wind-blown debris to fly around. And so those simple upgrades.
I'm thinking of the roof. That's the thing that I'm just curious about. But
Well, there are things. We did a whole, at least for asphalt shingles, we did a whole webinar and an article on, 9 things you can do to make your roof more wind resistant. It won't help on the impact though.
Mhm.
That's flying
Yeah.
tree branch is
What
probably
can you
going to
do?
puncture everything.
Mhm.
The one thing with winds to keep in mind, Kylie, is that you need to protect openings. Like if you have a window get smashed from debris,
Mhm.
The damage from wind-driven rain is not the worst of it is the pressurizing the house, which causes way more damage oftentimes, and roofs blow off in entirety or in sections. You just put up plywood or OSB before the storm gets there, and oftentimes that's very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I have, there's so many huge limbs that threaten my little lofted roof. So, that's what makes me nervous. I can picture my entire roof caving in from the weight of a branch.
It's amazing. I've, been through several high wind events and had many of my neighbors' homes have trees fall on them. And it's surprising, like, how localized the damage is. The tree like punches through the roof. And now if you're on the underside of it, that's a problem, but it doesn't like do huge destruction like you would imagine, or at least in the instances I've seen. It's pretty surprising. Strong homes are strong. Light wood framing is so redundant. It's incredible.
Looks worse from the outside, maybe.
What they told me is that being inside is the most terrifying experience of their lives, is that noise. I'm sure nothing sounds like a tree crashing through your roof.
I cannot imagine.
Jeff, have you known anyone to have trees fall on their buildings or cars?
We used to have a cottage up in Canada and had a tree come down on top of the roof. And it just poked a hole through where one branch came through.
Just what you said, huh?
Isn't it incredible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Took down the power lines and the mast, but that was about it.
I don't know if that tape's going to solve that problem, but
Right.
It was time for a re-roof anyway, so.
There you go.
that seems handy.
Yeah.
This comes from Cedar. This was on GBA, and it was so good I had to steal it. Did you see this on your site,
I
Kylie?
did, and then
Yeah.
I recognized it when I saw it in the script. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you it's a good one.
Yeah. Hi, all. I'm currently designing my house and trying to take a simple and budget approach. I have no problem designing my house with the stock window size, all 3x5, for example. But it seems like super efficient windows are always custom. Is this true? I realize there would be some inefficiency in having stock efficient windows because you might have to pick just one type of glazing that wouldn't be as efficient on the north wall as the south wall, for example. But it seems like maybe there is a place for stock efficient windows in a budget build. Anyway, just curious. I'm in West Coast Marine 4C. Kylie, do you want to paraphrase what folks on GBA thought as a start?
Sure, that the Anderson 400 series seems to be a hit with people. That seems that I know Brian Pontilillo used those windows for his place, not his new home, his former home that he remodeled, and he had a lot of positive things to say about it. So they're vinyl clad exterior with unfinished pine on the inside, and nothing fancy, but they perform well and look good and are affordable. That's the paraphrase that I would say.
I liked their thoughts of the 400 series. I think that's a fantastic window in a moderate price point. What do you think, Mike? Do you think there are other good moderately priced windows?
Well, I think as some people on the GBA thread pointed out, that buying a custom-sized window for the window manufacturers that are geared up for it doesn't come out to be more expensive than a stock window that you can just drive into your lumber yard that might be available through the wholesaler within a couple of days. I found that to be true myself. I can order right now, within range of limits, triple glazed casement windows, custom made, and I've priced them out against some major manufacturers' windows, and that are stock, and time frame about the same amount of lead time, and actually more cost effective. So it may have
Less
to do.
expensive.
Oh, what did I say? More
Cost
expensive?
effective.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, less expensive and cost effective to do it that way. Some of the people pointed out that even with the stock sizes, that the manufacturers don't always have those runs going through of a particular
They're made on
size.
demand, right? Like
Pretty much made on demand, yeah.
Who's the window you were talking about just a bit ago with the triple glaze sash?
There's some local suppliers. I think they're using Cardinal glass, but they're not nationwide or anything. They're just a local. I mean, they probably supply maybe Rhode Island and a nearby Massachusetts and Connecticut. Yeah.
What's the brand?
One of the ones I'm thinking, I can't, you know what? One of the problems with getting old is even though I know Greg is the production supervisor, and I can't remember the name of the darn company. Sorry.
We'll put that in the show
come back
notes
to
for
it,
you,
yeah.
those of you who are looking for Greg's windows.
Mike, do you think that the reason that they're cost equivalent-ish is that of just the way things are right now with with stock shipping, all of the complications around getting materials from manufacturers?
I'm not sure. I know they've always been able to be cost competitive or even less pricey than major national brands.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah.
So it's surprising.
Well, you know what it is? They started as a replacement window company doing replacement windows for homes. And what they did is they expanded their line into all of the other frame materials and styles. So all they're doing is they're purchasing in bulk all of those extrusions, and then they're combining those with the glass. And they do it all in a shop.
In that Q&A thread that we were referencing, somebody talked about a company called Modern Home Luxury. I looked on their site, and it sounds a little bit like what you just described, and it's got like 80 models of stop, tilt, turn, high performance windows. And I don't know this hardware, but Winkus hardware or Wink House hardware, is that good stuff?
No idea.
No.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it was a little bit of obscure, but this person seemed to be knowledgeable about, he was very, in that conversation, seemed
Did
to have
any of
things
the
to say.
GBA tribe vet this particular manufacturer, Kylie? Did you notice?
No, I did not. I didn't
Like
pay as
sometimes
close attention.
I noticed that, spam bots like populate forum posts sometimes like that,
Oh, no. I
for
look
retailers,
for those. Oh, no. I don't think so. He was part of the conversation. I'll double check, but
That's cool.
I didn't get that impression at all.
Jeff, what do you think about this question?
I mean, I have no real experience in the windows, but one of the things, I mean, as far as efficiency of windows is, keeping in mind what kind of window you need for each location, whether you need whether you can get away with a fixed window or a casement.
That's fixed windows cost way less, have better energy performance, and oftentimes people don't open their windows anyway, especially in certain parts of the home. So that's good advice.
Or certain parts of the country.
Yeah.
Or certain parts of the country, yeah.
And making those, like, you can picture a lot of passive houses have, those tight, small, almost perfectly square windows plugged in at the top, fixed windows, the top of a wall, just for light and,
Aesthetic appeal.
Yeah, mostly probably, yeah.
I'm going to ask the podcast audience, as I often do, to weigh in on this. What is your favorite, medium range window? And I'd like to hear from folks what they like. I've had great luck with the Andersons, reasonably priced, easy to get, especially if you get casements. And not everyone likes casement windows, but casement windows perform better than double hungs because there's better sealing. When the wind's blowing, it's pushing the window tighter shut instead of trying to hold back a sash,
And on your point about the casements, it's a good one. Another thing to consider is awning windows. I think those don't get noticed by a lot of people. I'm a fan of those. I put them in my house. It's full of them. But you can tilt the window out and it can stay out when it rains. Whereas with a casement, when you open it, now you're actually exposing the windows inside of the sash to the weather.
Yeah. What do you think of hopper windows, Mike?
Depends on which way the hopper folds.
I'm not a fan of those. They seem to show up in a lot of high-end houses. I'm not crazy about them. Yeah.
They're fine. Yeah. They always tilt to the inside, so water's going to flow to the outside.
Yeah.
My question, and folks who hear me on the podcast probably were sick of me bringing this up, but like, how do you furnish, a freaking room with tilt-turn windows? Like, what do you do? You can't open the window if you have furniture there.
Yeah.
Right.
Just sort of assume a lot of space.
Yeah.
I've never lived in a house with those. Have you, Mike?
Only rental houses, not, long-term. For a couple of weeks when I was in Europe and different places, and they're just like, over there, it's every house has them. It's kind of funny, seeing them over there. And I didn't even realize the first few times I saw them that they had much better performance characteristics than the windows we had here. I just thought, well, they're different. But now we see them coming here so much, and it's not going to be that much further in the future. We're going to see a lot of manufacturers here in the U.S. that are making that style.
I'm surprised we don't see more. I guess
I wonder why. Like, why doesn't Anderson want some of that business? But I mean, they can't even make the windows, their normal windows, fast enough now, right? Like,
they own the market practically.
Jason wrote in, I'm needing advice on how to properly flash the lower wall to roof intersection. I ripped out the rotten wood siding. I'm planning on adding some OSB, rigid foam, then vinyl siding. The rot was under the old vinyl, which was not really flashed at all. Mike, can you describe, if you would, the kind of scenario that Jason is dealing with here?
Yeah, so the photo that Jason sent us shows lap siding, wood lap siding, and you can see the bottom. Well, it's where a sloped roof meets a wall, and you can see where the bottom 6 inches or a foot of that old wood lap siding is all decayed, and you can see some of the nails from the vinyl siding. So what it looks like happened, which is a common thing I've seen, where a homeowner doesn't want to repaint, or they balance the cost of repainting a house versus putting on vinyl. And in some cases, it doesn't cost that much more. So the homeowner had the contractor put vinyl on, but the contractor was probably you know, he sharpened his pencil or just doesn't know enough about construction and did not put additional flashing between the wall and the roof that was integrated with the new vinyl siding. In other words, the vinyl siding was not much more than another layer of paint, and if anything, made matters a little bit worse. So any water that was flowing down that vinyl siding, when it would hit the roof, it would splash up a little bit because there's a lot of water that actually cascades down the wall. Even though there's a tremendous amount coming down a roof, a slight wind will put a lot of water against the wall. It drips down onto the roofing, splashes up. So it was getting on the underside of all of these pieces of lap siding, then accelerating the rot. So there's no rot in the wall sheathing. There's probably no water leaks on the inside. It was just reusing the old step flashing by leaving it in place without putting in the new flashing.
It was kind of composty in there, right?
Oh yeah, it wouldn't be hard to take it off. So in thinking about what Jason's planning to do, he said, adding some OSB, rigid foam, and then vinyl siding. So I couldn't tell from what he was describing if that OSB was just going to be like a patch piece to kind of level out the rotted spot in the siding, the old siding, and then put foam over that. My recommendation would certainly be to remove that old siding, get a good water resistive barrier either against the wall sheathing or after you put the new rigid foam on, then over the foam. It can be done either way depending on how your trim details are. And then put in all new step flashing, the proper size. And that way, when the new vinyl siding goes on, there won't be any sort of water problems going on in the future.
Can I ask a question? Is it good enough? So, in order to put in new step flashing, you have to re-roof or at least patch it into the shingles, right? Can you just bend L-shaped flashing and put it over the shingles in a bed of tar? Is that enough to make a good seal?
So what you're talking about is a type of flashing called continuous flashing. So instead of the step flashings that a lot of northern builders are familiar with, continuous flashing is just a big long L. And it would run the whole length from the ridge down to wherever that wall terminates. And what you're talking about is applying that over the top of the shingles, and would it work? They do it a lot. When I was researching my roofing book like 25 years ago, I spent some time out in the Pacific Northwest, and it was a pretty common detail out there, which was surprising in an area that gets a fair amount of rain along coastal Oregon and coastal Washington. It wasn't on every house, but quite a few houses had it. And I'm guessing it might work. Probably not the answer you were thinking was going to come from me. But
Well, I think it might work too. The worry is that water is going to be blown under the flashing, which is prevented on step flashing because it's layered into the shingle layer, right? This doesn't have that. It's on top. So you have to rely on some kind of sealant or whatever underneath to keep wind-driven rain from getting under that and into the house.
The ideal way, of course, is going to be you can usually stagger back the shingles, removing them from the wall out to wherever the next joint is. So it'll be a little back and forth depending on that offset, and remove all those in a column. So you might be exposing a foot to 2.5 feet of shingle of roof there, and then layering in step flashing all the way along. That would be, if you're using asphalt shingles, that would be, the time proven method of doing it.
A lot more work, right? A lot more.
Well, it depends, if the existing roof was due for a re-roof in say 4 or 5 years, I might be inclined to do as Patrick suggested and put that L flashing down, the continuous flashing, with the intent in the future of making that my counter flashing
Oh,
with my step flashing and sort of integrate the whole thing, step
hmm.
flashings and counter flashing. So there's a few different ways it could work.
What about zip tape as a interim solution? Do we?
You know, the interesting thing when I was watching the video we were talking about earlier that
The
the reader
fortified home
about
program video.
yeah, when
Okay.
the video from the Institute for Insurance Institute for Home and Business Safety, they use zip tape over plywood. I don't know if you
I
picked up
did
the
notice
brand of the
that.
tape,
Yeah, I saw that
which,
too.
as anybody who's worked with zip tape knows, it is a really good bonding tape, whether you
Uh-huh.
use it with zip or anything else.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it's not the only one that sticks so good, but the advances in tapes in our lifetime is mind-boggling. I think you'd agree.
And people think that zip tape's new. It's been around for I think 20 or 21 years, something like that. It's been almost 20 years that they've had that tape. And I don't know if they reformulated, but I remember even when it first came out, we got some of the first samples. There was a show at the time called residential something. It was a part of Build Boston. It was like their residential trade show that was on for a few years, and they were introducing it at the time years ago. And I was like, no way this is going to work. We know that you can't just stick tape on things and expect it to work. We were very skeptical. But when you saw how tenacious the tape was, then you sort of say, well, maybe this will work.
I wonder if anyone's like opened up a home that was taped with the very early products. And if you're listening to the show, please let us know
Yeah.
how that held up, because I'm curious. I think we're getting to the point now where
Some time.
somebody would expect something to last at least 20 years, right? And we're getting there.
Well, I know I've pulled off, and you've probably done it as well if you've ever done a re-roof, pulled off roofs where some of the early 1980s, late 70s, early 80s Grace Ice and Water Shield was bonded down as an ice barrier. And I've pulled off to re-roof those, and that stuff is still stuck and it's still supple. The plastic on the top, the film on top is still got a little bit of stretch to it, and the adhesive underneath, if you can peel any up at all, is still got a tack to it, and it's still, when you stick a hole in it, it still kind of grips around the shank of that fastener. So that stuff's got some time proven honor to its
That's good too, because you would not be able to
performance.
get it off.
Even if you wanted to, yeah. I like thinking about builders, working on these high performance homes that like Ben Bogey's building right now, and 100 years what they're going to be finding and all these materials. And it's fascinating to kind of project because of all these advancements that you're talking about, and things are even more tenacious these days, right? So
think every house we build, whether it's in a track home development or whether it's a custom home, every home is an experiment because no two homes are exactly alike. A little different sun exposure, a little bit different wind exposure. It was Joe and Sam on one job, and it was Mary and Jonathan on another job. So, the different practices, that even the same house being built by design, but different people working on it,
And the
technicians.
weather being different, right?
Yeah.
Yep, the weather being different. So.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so many
we
variables.
won't know. People in the future will learn from what we're doing today the same way we're learning
Exactly.
from what was built 50, 100, 200, 300 years ago.
I love that.
Obviously, with this bay window roof project I've been documenting, it's
With
got
your
me
hand.
thinking a lot about water management, of course, right? And I think carpenters learn how to detail things based on the rotted stuff they have come across in their
Makes
career,
sense.
right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
You must have
Didn't get that right.
I think of you, Mike, as the king of flashing. I feel like you've written so many articles on this topic, kick out flashing around chimneys, and
there's a lot of other people that are flashing nerds as well.
I know.
There's a lot of us out there.
Flashing Awareness
I'm
Day at this point.
Glad you brought that up, because the after show, which we have failed to mention because I'm a terrible host, is going to have Andy Grace and Mike Gerton on, and myself.
Oh, perfect.
Jeff, and we're going to talk about roofing and flashing, and I feel so privileged to be, having a conversation with the two rock star roofers in the country. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, that's good news. been looking forward to meeting him.
Wonderful.
He was excited to talk to you too. So I asked him last night after having a few beers when I thought he would be more agreeable, and he was all into it. So. And he told me today if I had sobered up and decided I didn't want to do it, he would let me off the hook too. So. It's going to be fun, right?
Yes, you're going to have a great time. It's wonderful.
Kylie, tell me, so have you started looking for a rental property? Have you gotten that far? No.
Mm-mm. No.
Okay. Do you have boots on the ground to keep an eye out for the right place for you?
Yep. I have.
Okay.
Yes. I've got plans. It'll happen. That area, the Berkshires, is really magical. And I've worked as a historic rose gardener up there for a long time. And the Tanglewood, there are all these little cottages out there where musicians practice, and it's beautiful country. And I just need to find the right person with a little garret, and I can do some gardening for them. And there we go. Boom.
What's a garret?
Like these days it's called a bonus room or something above a garage, that type of thing. That's
why we have on the show to teach us, new words and
that's
culture.
an old word, I think. No, I'm a Luddite. I'm dating myself.
So Kylie, if your ultimate plan is to build a custom house on your ideal location up in Vermont, would you be staying in Massachusetts during that process when the house is being built, or are you going to make another step from Massachusetts, Western Mass, up to Vermont nearby where the house would be built?
Mike, I can't even imagine yet. I'm not sure. I appreciate your interest, and I do recall you offering to build a house. You wrote in and
I didn't say I'd build. I said it would help.
Okay. No. I know.
I'll show up to work.
I would. I'll be right there
gladly.
with you.
Good excuse for me to take my camper up to Vermont. I can park it on your lot and hang out for a couple weeks.
Well, that sounds like fun. I'm in on that caper too. Well, it's been a pleasure, y'all. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Mike, Kylie, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions, suggestions, and comments to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, and review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Stay tuned for going to be the best after show yet.